The sun rose over the horizon of Zephyria, a planet so breathtakingly beautiful it seemed plucked from the dreams of poets. Its skies shimmered with hues of lavender and gold, its ocean sparkled like liquid sapphires, and its forests hummed with the melodies of creatures that seemed to sing in harmony with the wind. To the untrained eye, Zephyria was paradise, a Class O death world, as classified by the Galactic Council, but only because its ecosystems were so perfectly balanced that any outside interference would spell disaster. For millennia, it had remained untouched, a jewel of the cosmos, until humanity arrived. Our story begins with Dr. Ilara Voss, a xenobiologist whose life had been a series of quiet struggles. Ilara had always been an outsider, even among her own kind. Growing up on Earth, she had been the child who preferred the company of books and microscopes to people. Her parents, both renowned scientists, had little time for her, and her peers mocked her for her obsession with alien worlds. But Ilara had a dream: to discover a planet so pure, so untouched, that it could teach humanity how to live in harmony with nature. When she was selected to lead the first human expedition to Zephyria, she felt as though her life had finally found purpose. The journey to Zephyria was long and arduous, but as Ilara stepped onto its surface for the first time, she felt a sense of peace she had never known. The air was sweet, the ground soft beneath her boots, and the sounds of the forest seemed to welcome her. She spent her days documenting the flora and fauna, marveling at the intricate balance of life. She named the creatures she encountered: luminos, the bioluminescent birds that lit up the night; verdants, the tree-like beings that seemed to communicate through vibrations; and sereniths, the gentle, deer-like animals that roamed the plains. For the first time in her life, Ilara felt like she belonged. But as the days turned into weeks, Ilara began to notice subtle changes. The luminos were flying lower, their lights dimmer. The verdant's vibrations grew erratic, and the sereniths seemed restless. At first, she dismissed it as her imagination, but deep down, she knew something was wrong. She tried to convince her team to slow down their research, to tread more carefully, but they brushed her off. "It's just a planet, Ilara," they said. "It's not alive." But Ilara knew better. Zephyria was alive, and it was watching them. The storm came without warning. One moment, the sky was clear; the next, it was a swirling mass of black clouds and lightning. Ilara and her team scrambled to secure their equipment, but the wind was relentless, tearing through their camp like a vengeful spirit. As the rain began to fall, Ilara noticed something strange. The water was acidic, burning through the metal of their tools and leaving scorch marks on the ground. She shouted for everyone to take cover, but it was too late. The storm was upon them. When the storm finally passed, the camp was in ruins. Equipment was destroyed, supplies were scattered, and worst of all, one of the team members, Dr. Marcus Hale, was missing. Marcus had been the most vocal critic of Ilara's cautious approach, often mocking her for her sentimental attachment to the planet. Now, as they searched for him, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that Zephyria was sending them a message. They found Marcus deep in the forest, his body twisted and broken. His face was frozen in an expression of pure terror, as though he had seen something unimaginable. The team was shaken, but Ilara was devastated. She had warned them, begged them to respect the planet, but they hadn't listened. Now, Marcus was dead, and Zephyria was no longer the paradise they had imagined. As the days passed, the team grew increasingly paranoid. Strange noises echoed through the forest at night, and the creatures they had once admired now seemed to regard them with suspicion. The verdant's vibrations grew louder, almost deafening, and the sereniths began to avoid them altogether. Ilara tried to keep the team together, but tensions were high. Some wanted to leave immediately, while others insisted on staying to complete their research. Ilara knew they were walking a fine line, but she also knew they couldn't leave without understanding what had happened to Marcus. One night, as Ilara lay in her makeshift bed, she heard a voice. It was soft, almost imperceptible, but it was there. "You do not belong here," it whispered. Ilara sat up, her heart pounding. She looked around, but the camp was silent. She told herself it was just her imagination, but deep down, she knew the truth. Zephyria was speaking to her. The voice became a constant presence in Alara's mind, a whisper that grew louder with each passing day. At first, she tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. It was as though the planet itself was trying to communicate with her, to warn her. She tried to explain it to her team, but they dismissed it as stress or fatigue. "You're just tired, Alara," they said. "You need to rest." But Alara knew better. Zephyria was alive, and it was angry. The team's research continued, but their efforts were increasingly met with resistance. Equipment malfunctioned, samples were contaminated, and the creatures they had once studied now seemed to avoid them. The luminos stopped lighting up the night, leaving the forest in darkness, and the verdant's vibrations grew so loud that they could no longer be ignored. The team was on edge, their nerves frayed, and Alara could feel the tension building. One day, as they were collecting samples near a river, they were attacked by a swarm of insect-like creatures. They were small, no larger than a human hand, but they moved with terrifying speed and precision. The team fought them off, but not without casualties. 2 of the team members were badly injured, and their supplies were destroyed. Alara knew they couldn't stay much longer, but she also knew they couldn't leave without answers. As the team struggled to recover, Alara began to piece together the truth. Zephyria wasn't just a planet, it was a living, breathing organism, a complex web of life that had evolved over millions of years. The creatures, the plants, the very air they breathed, all of it was connected, a single entity working in perfect harmony. Humanity's arrival had disrupted that harmony, and Zephyria was fighting back. Alara tried to convince the team to leave, but they refused. "We can't just abandon our research," they argued. "We've come too far." But Alara knew the stakes were higher than their research. If they didn't leave soon, Zephyria would destroy them. The final straw came when the team discovered a massive, ancient tree deep in the forest. Its trunk was gnarled and twisted, its branches reaching high into the sky. At its base was a pool of water, so clear it seemed to glow. The team was fascinated, but Alara felt a deep sense of dread. She knew this tree was the heart of Zephyria, the source of its power. If they disturbed it, there would be no turning back. Despite Alara's protests, the team began to take samples from the tree. As they did, the ground began to shake, and the air grew thick with tension. Alara shouted for them to stop, but it was too late. The tree began to wither, its leaves turning black and falling to the ground. The pool of water at its base began to boil, and the creatures of the forest began to converge on their location. Alara knew they had to leave, but as they turned to run, they were surrounded. The creatures of Zephyria, luminos, verdants, sereniths, and others they had never seen before, formed a circle around them, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The team was trapped, and Alara knew there was no escape. As the creatures closed in, Alara felt a surge of desperation. She knew they had made a terrible mistake, but she also knew there had to be a way to make things right. She stepped forward, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "We're sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "We didn't understand. We didn't mean to harm you." For a moment, nothing happened. The creatures stared at her, their eyes unblinking, and Alara felt a wave of hopelessness. But then, something extraordinary occurred. The ground beneath her feet began to glow, and the voice she had heard before returned, louder and clearer than ever. "You have seen the truth," it said. "Now you must choose." Alara looked around, her heart pounding. The creatures began to part, forming a path that led back to the ancient tree. The pool of water at its base was no longer boiling, instead, it shimmered with a soft, golden light. Alara knew what she had to do. She walked to the tree and knelt before it, placing her hand on its trunk. As she did, she felt a surge of energy, a connection to something greater than herself. The voice spoke again, this time directly to her. "You are the bridge," it said. "You must decide the fate of your kind." L.